Movie critics criticizing an actor for more than just their performance is really not all that unusual. While some movie podcasts are at least classy enough to vow never to talk shit about actors, a vow they stringently live by, I might add, most professional critics have made no such promise, and there have been several notable occasions over the history of film criticism where a film's review went beyond the acting abilities of the performers to also address their appearance, political views, or personal scandals. So it wasn't that surprising when, upon the release of the James Bond film A View to a Kill in 1985, a number of the film's reviews took aim at the age of the leading man and, at that time, long-running Bond, 57-year-old Roger Moore. Perhaps none more harshly than the Washington Post's Paul Addonazio, who said Moore isn't just long in the tooth, he's got tusks, and what looks like an eye job has given him the pie-eyed blankness of a zombie, adding that instead of 007, Moore seemed more like 0070. But what was maybe more surprising than the critics attacking Moore's age was the fact that Moore himself publicly agreed with them. Moore admitted that, in addition to the undeniable implausibility of a noticeably older Bond in the franchise's increasingly epic action sequences, he also felt embarrassed to be filming love scenes with actresses young enough to be his daughter. And so, later that year, Moore officially announced his retirement from the James Bond franchise, bringing to an end a 12-year, 7-film run as the character. And while it might seem unfortunate it ended with an entry in which many, including Moore himself, felt he was too old, it should be noted that Moore was 45 years old when he first took the role of 1973's Live and Let Die, still the oldest actor to take over the role. And he later admitted he already felt too old for the character even by his second entry, 1974's The Man with the Golden Gun. So the fact that he kept going for 5 more movies is either admirable or irritating, depending on your perspective. But then, in certain ways, Moore was always an odd, even somewhat surprising choice for Bond. He was an admitted hypochondriac, suffered from vertigo, was afraid of handling firearms, had to wear a hairpiece to hide a balding spot in every Bond installment, and looked so awkward while running that every scene of Bond running during his tenure had to be filmed with a double. And yet, despite this, there's no denying Moore's run as Bond was wildly successful for a time, and his more campy take on the character remains the Bond of choice for many fans, particularly those who grew up during his time in the role. And while some said Moore looked too soft and weak to play Bond even before his age became more of an issue in the later installments, famed Hollywood tough man Lee Marvin would have to disagree, as Moore actually beat Marvin up in a real-life fight while they were filming 1976 Shout at the Devil, with Marvin later conceding that Moore was built like granite and that nobody should ever underestimate him again. And it's also true that discussions of his age might never have been an issue at all, or at least not dominated his time in the role, if he had in fact first played Bond when the series producers originally wanted him to, as he was reportedly offered the Bond part twice during the 60s, but had to turn down both offers due to his commitment to a hit TV series he was starring in at the time, a series based on a literary character that Moore was such a fan of, he had tried to purchase the rights to the books himself before being cast in the show, and one that almost certainly worked as an audition of sorts for the Bond character, as in an early episode of the series, Moore's character is even mistaken for Bond. The role in question was that of a crusading do-gooder who operates outside the law to help those in need, and when it would be rebooted as a hopeful blockbuster movie nearly 3 decades after the show ended, Moore would still remain involved, making a brief vocal cameo as a radio announcer. But the part Moore once played would this time be inhabited by a Hollywood star who, like Moore after A View to a Kill, had himself recently decided to step away from a popular movie franchise character known for being played by several actors. Though, unlike Moore's long tenure as Bond, Val Kilmer was giving up Batman after only 1 entry. No worries, though, as obviously this new franchise he was starting would be just as popular, right? The year is 1997, and Paramount Pictures are ready to attempt a new movie version of a proven vigilante character already popular across books, radio, TV, and previous movies since the 1930s, and in the process hopefully launch the next big action thriller franchise with The Saint. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Welcome once again to Fair Letter Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And today I'm Mother Teresa.
But usually I don't have a name.
Oh my God, are we getting canceled? I got so nervous I started sweating when you started that. Like,
yeah, that's all I got.
Okay, good. You don't want to do the rest of the podcast in that voice? You don't want to just like
don't push me where I gotta go.
Actually, that you doing a voice like that doesn't put you too far off from the main character of today's movie.
Yeah.
in multiple ways, based on what you said. So, Chris, nice to be back for the start of a new theme, which is always exciting. I want another month-long theme here, and that is, well, you know what? We got done up with October, and I know we didn't do any like Halloween themed, thing. We were talking about just cartoons and animated stuff, but Halloween is always in my blood in October. And, of course, Halloween is like a time when people like to be a little naughty, right? But it's time to stop being naughty and time to start being Noyce.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you. And that is, we are starting our new theme, which is, it's not just November here at Favorite Franchise, it's Noyce-vember.
Noyce! Yes, and this is a month dedicated to the Australian director Phillip Noyce. The man of Patriot Games, Clear and Present Danger, a future F2F movie, Blind Fury, we'll talk about someday. But then he actually has appeared on the podcast before when we looked at the Angelina Jolie action thriller Salt. So, yeah.
Yeah, so he's going to get 4 entries in this, and if not more, ultimately, because he's still going. He hasn't stopped. Yep. And even, I believe, 2023's Fast Charlie maybe was trying to start a franchise as well. So, like, the jury's out on that one, So, so we should probably just make clear right off the bat, before we get into what the movie is and everything, like, because we're calling this like Noyce-vember, because we're giving him like a month on a podcast dedicated to failures, a lot of people I think will be like, are these guys like making fun of Phillip Noyce? And I'm just going to say right up top, that's not the case. This is I think we're going to treat this as like an actual tribute to a kind of directorial career that doesn't get enough acclaim and attention. Those guys who just bang out programmers for their entire career, right? I think there's something to be said for that, and I think it's kind of cool. So yeah, it'll be interesting to look at not only 2 movies of his, but 2 movies that actually came consecutively in his filmography, and we can talk about that. And that is starting with today's movie, 1997's The Saint. I know what everyone's thinking, oh my God, they made a prequel all about young Howard Saint, John Travolta's character from the Punisher movie. As much as we all want that movie to happen, that's not what this is. This is a different The Saint. So Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about 1997's The Saint?
For sure. And first of all, I love that you've mentioned The Punisher already because, like I've said, this is directed by Phillip Noyce, but it is written by Jonathan Hensley, who wrote The Punisher from 2000 and what was it, 2004? I think the John Travolta and
the Thomas Jane one. Let's not worry about the year.
Yeah, for sure. But that was the one we covered that during our New Year's punishment party a while back. But he also wrote Die Hard with a Vengeance, Jumanji, Armageddon. It's also co-written by Wesley Strick, who wrote Arachnophobia, Cape Fear, Wolf, Doom, and another F2F alum, A Nightmare on Elm Street, the reboot from, the bad one.
That's a real highs and lows filmography.
It really is.
I'm guessing when he meets people at dinner parties, he leads with Cape Fear. I'm guessing, and then maybe he reads the room a little bit. He's like, okay, I can probably bring up Arachnophobia with this crowd. They seem pretty cool, but I'm not sure if he's rushing to talk about Wolf, Doom, or Nightmare on Elm Street.
For sure. The Saint is based on a character created by Leslie Charteris. How would you pronounce this?
Yeah, I'm not sure, man. There's another name coming up later on that I got to talk about that I'm already like sweating about having to pronounce. So Leslie Charteris, I would say.
Okay, cool. The budget of the movie, $68 million. Domestically, $61 million. Worldwide, this was a little weird because I have a feeling we got some Hollywood accounting going on because from different sources I saw this movie make between $118 million and $169 million. Noyce. Speaking of Noyce. Moderate hit.
Yeah. And it kind of even like flagged as like we've talked about this before when this hit like a moderate hit in the theaters, but then it did fairly well at rental and sold quite a bit on DVD as well. So I think this is probably like another one of those ones where like nobody lost jobs over this or anything. This wasn't like an infamous bomb.
Yeah.
It just obviously didn't do what it needed to do. And I think even then there was some hubbub kind of surrounding the release of it, and in particular, like the leading man and like his decision to do this film. And that maybe like ultimately I don't know, sucked up the air in the room a little bit in discussions of this movie. So we'll talk about all this, but that's probably just the case. Like, I think if this had maybe done like, I don't know, what do you think, like 50 million more in the theaters, maybe they would have thought about it.
I think so.
It was just too modest for them to bother.
So where do you want to start? Do you want to start with a little bit Noyce-vember, or do you want you start about the history of the Saint as a property?
We could just quickly do a little bit of Noyce-vember, because I think we've obviously already talked about Phillip Noyce when we talked about Salt. I didn't go back and re-listen to that episode to hear how much we already covered his whole career.
Yeah.
And it's not like we're going to get into his whole career. But as I already said, and this, even without getting into my thoughts on this movie or anything, he's one of those directors who I have a respect for this, and I think this, because there's a lot of directors who will make programmers, even Clint Eastwood in his like long varied career. He occasionally will just be like, you know what, I just want to make something like Blood Work. Or even like he's got that Juror number 2 coming out, which probably will end up being his last movie. The dude's like 110 years old. And it's like, even that, like the trailer looks fun, but it's like, wow, if that's his last movie is just kind of like a fun little genre programmer, right? Like that's interesting that every once in a while he likes to do those, but then he also will give you like an Unforgiven or a $1 Million Baby. So there are directors who do that, right? Go back and forth. But Phillip Noyce has had a long career. His first feature was a 1977 movie called Backroads, and they said as recently as 2023, Fast Charlie, a new Pierce Brosnan film, and he's been working pretty consistently through that whole run, and he's never really like tried to make like a big like prestige project or anything, It's like, I don't know. I don't know the whole backstory of this guy. We haven't interviewed him. That'll come in Noyce-vember 2, hopefully, after he hears these. I don't know if he's ever had like an inkling to do that, But it seems to me like he just seems pretty happy to be like, yeah, I'll just keep making these little modestly budgeted, and sometimes not even modestly budgeted, but these just kind of like minor blockbuster franchise films and genre films.
Right.
And I dig that. And it's like, I don't even know that you could say he has like an overall directorial style other than it's the style of those kind of movies, and you would know him if you know what I meant if you saw him. It's the movies that play on TNT and TBS on Sunday afternoons, and your dad stands in the living room and watches them. Right? It's like he's very much got that vibe to what he does. Yeah.
Over 60 directorial credits. This guy's got a few coming up still. Like you said, he keeps working. TV, miniseries, movies, short films, like I said, blockbuster-y type stuff, like at least trying to. I mean, again, when we talked about Salt, that was meant to be a franchise starter. But then, he's no stranger to franchise filmmaking. I mentioned Clear and Present Danger and Patriot Games. He was the guy that kind of got the Jack Ryan series going on theatrically. So pretty, would you call him, we talked about journeyman type of directors, is he like a Joe Johnston in that sense? I
think that's like a perfect comparison. Journeyman is a great title to give him. I guess the one slight correction I would give is he's not the guy, because like John McTiernan directed Hunt for October, so he starts the Jack Ryan thing.
Oh, right.
But that is the thing, right? Then when John McTiernan is like, I'm John McTiernan, I'm not going to do the rest of these. It's like, well, who's the director who can do the sequels, And he is the guy who Harrison Ford comes in with him. And so that's Journeyman's a great term, but that's a perfect example of throughout his career, he does have some undeniable bangers in there. I really like his 2 Jack Ryan movies. I think I mentioned when we did Salt, I think I recommended to you to check out 1989's Dead Calm, the thriller he made with Sam Neill, Billy Zane. That's great. It's. And then there's some in there, we would never watch it because it wasn't trying to start a franchise. But then he'll also do a sliver, which is him being like, ooh, I'll cash in on these, in the post Basic Instinct world. Suddenly we had a lot of these sex thrillers, and he's like, I'll do one of those, and it's not very good, but also it's just him. It's that journeyman thing, right? He's saying this is what's hot right now, so I'll just hop onto this, and I don't know, you can't turn your nose up at this career. He hasn't. There's never been a long stretch where he hasn't had a movie. So.
And when we say journeyman director, sometimes that is a little bit of a negative, even in our context of our podcast. But I think he's not the kind of journeyman director to just place a camera and get the producers are shadow directing. You know what I mean? I'm seeing a couple of these, he's worked for ABC networks, but then he's worked on miniseries that are prestigious TV. And I think, again, like you said, it's not really he has a style, so to speak, but he's not he's not like your favorite director, Kevin Smith, directing the DC universe stuff on TV, CW stuff.
No. No, he's worked long enough and consistently to like his style is I would just call it like overall competence, right? He's gotten very, very good at his job because he's just worked at it so hard and over time. And so I think I think you're right. I think he's not worried about being flashy, but I think the distinction there is when you say like, oh, why we mean that's not a bad thing for him in terms of journeyman director is because he's also not taking on the kind of projects where that would be a detriment. You know, he's not trying to direct a Captain America movie or a Justice League movie. He's doing these little, like we said, these little, kind of more adult spy thrillers or like political thrillers where that kind of like just like sure hand is kind of all the film needs. You know, and I really think he's probably someone, he strikes me as someone who probably just runs a set really well. Yeah. Takes notes well. We'll talk about that with this movie. Is willing to make changes when asked, and I'm guessing probably actors like working with him. I don't know. I'm making all these assumptions just based on the fact that he keeps working and we haven't heard anything bad about him. Sure. But I'm guessing he's just like one of those like ultimate professionals who's just like, yeah, I've been doing this a long time. Give me a script, I'll figure it out, and I'm your man if you just want to quickly get this finished in the theaters. Yeah.
I'll come in under time and under budget.
Yeah.
The Saint itself, a property. 1928 this started. Wow. like holy shit, it's 100-year-old property.
Of course, we all remember Charlie Chaplin, the original Saint.
That's wild. Yeah, 1928 to 1983 this book series ran. It's no stranger to even being put to screen. There's been 10 Hollywood films in the past, 2 TV series, one starring Roger Moore, which is kind of like the definitive version, I guess. Throughout have you ever seen the TV show?
No, but like when you say definitive, you're dead right, because I remember when this movie came out, like, spoiler alert to later discussion, but like my only conception of the Saint when this came out is I just thought it was only a Roger Moore TV show, because that's what I always heard, and that's only coming from you and I have talked before. We've done a whole episode about our love of James Bond, and even though Roger Moore is my least favorite Bond, I mean he's still a Bond, and I still respect him to that level. And like I was always aware, what's the thing he did before Bond that kind of got him Bond, and I knew he played the Saint, and like so that's I just honestly until doing the research for this movie, I thought the Saint was just a Roger Moore TV show. I didn't know this whole other, like, how much history there was to this character.
Isn't that funny that Roger Moore played the Saint, which eventually leads him into Bond? And then there was rumors back in the mid-'80s that Moore was going to be producing another Saint project with Pierce Brosnan attached. And the only reason Pierce Brosnan was attached was because of Remington Steele. So it's funny that the Saint is kind of a through line of 2 James Bond actors getting the role. I find that very, very fascinating. Very fascinating.
Yeah.
Also, there was 9 TV movies as well, and 1 radio series starring Vincent Price. So this
now that I want to go check out, because I've talked on here before. I think in something it came up where like I love radio dramas, and like probably when we did The Shadow, right? Like I love that as
makes sense. Yeah,
I love that as like a format, and that Vincent Price is like one of my like 3 favorite actors, and he's just got like such a great distinctive voice, like that worked well in film, but also I'm sure like obviously works well on radio. So I would love to hear that because I bet it rules.
For sure. The Saint as a character himself, I guess, other than your knowledge of a Roger Moore playing the character, do you recognize this guy at all? Like, is this something that lived in the ether of your life?
Well, of course I don't recognize him. He's a master of disguise. Like that.
Wow,
how
nice.
Could I?
Nice.
No, I really again, as I said, I knew that it was a Roger Moore show, and that's kind of where my knowledge ended. I think just because of the whole Bond thing, and like I just think I assumed it was like another secret agent kind of thing, or if anything, like more like not a cop show, but more like a vigilante show. I didn't know anything about him being like this like kind of Robin Hood thief, but who primarily steals from bad guys. Like maybe I'm giving away a little bit what you're about to say about what the concept is, but no, I had like really no perception of this. My entire knowledge was that it was a Roger Moore show, and then when this movie came out, I'm just going to give this away now because to answer your question, this is my first time seeing this movie. I didn't see it when it came out, but what I remember from the trailers and everything was like this was the movie where like Val Kilmer wears a bunch of disguises. So that's what I knew. I was like, it's some kind of like guy who wears disguises. Like that was my knowledge of the Saint, and like nothing else really. What about you?
Yeah, same here. I mean, I kind of just knew the poster. Like, I know the poster with the blue silhouette and Val Kilmer's face on it. It's quite I don't want to say iconic, but I think I've noticed that DVD on shelves, like at video rental stores or even when at my past retail jobs. But other than that, nothing.
Yeah, and even and this is kind of maybe getting into later discussion, but same with me. I always saw that DVD. I knew it was it was all over video stores. I remember this movie being on cable all the time. But there was just also to me, it felt like reason to avoid the movie just because it came out and kind of didn't have a great reputation. Mm-hmm. And it was also it was the moment where culturally we kind of turned on Val Kilmer. So we'll get into that as well. So that was kind of, I think, also feeding into, as we said, the perception of the movie and maybe why it didn't get any sequels and why I never watched it.
Well, it's interesting that you're saying that we turned on Val Kilmer because the two people that were approached for this role first were Ralph Fiennes. He was offered, I think, $1 million to be in the film, and that just kind of fell apart. Sidney Pollack was supposed to direct.
So weird.
Very strange, and I guess that saved us from doing a, I don't know, Pollack's Giving? No?
Nope.
Moving on.
Ralph Fiennes was no, this script isn't strong enough for me. I'm waiting for something like The Avengers.
Yes, exactly. And then it was offered to Hugh Grant as well, which he did not like the direction of the character in this movie. Mm-hmm. Or in the script, I guess. So he said no. Val Kilmer came on because, he had just done a little film. I don't know if you've seen this movie, Trev, but he did a Batman movie. And it was received quite poorly. quite poorly. And
but the movie was a huge hit.
It was a huge hit.
Batman Forever, because remember Batman Forever, that was the highest opening weekend of all time when it came out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the same year, Heat comes out, and again, critically and commercially acclaimed. Although 1 year later, he does The Island of Dr. Moreau, and then Dead Girl, and The Ghost and the Darkness.
Yeah.
3 movies that I think are universally, well, maybe not universally, but people do not like those movies.
I don't even know if anyone remembers Dead Girl. I certainly don't. But I do remember the stink around Island of Dr. Moreau and Ghost in the Darkness. Mm-hmm. And beyond that, even though Batman Forever was a hit, there was some discussion coming out of it about Joel Schumacher and him not having the best working relationship.
Right.
And then that definitely continues into a lot of behind-the-scenes stories about Island of Dr. Moreau and Ghost in the Darkness. About this is what I mean about culture starting to turn on him. His reputation as an on-set personality was starting to precede him a little bit, and he was not having the best reputation in the world as a
bit of a diva. A diva?
Yeah, diva. Taking himself too seriously. Just difficult. There's a really infamous story that actually ties into this movie, which I'll bring up a little later. But it was just because I remember there was I don't know if this is true or if it's apocryphal, but I've heard that Joel Schumacher, after working with him, was asked, "Would you work with Val Kilmer again?" And what I've always heard is Joel Schumacher said, "I wouldn't cast Val Kilmer if I was making the Val Kilmer story." I don't know if that's true. I kind of want it to be true because it's such a great quote, but I just think I think there was definitely a period there, and this movie's wrapped up in it, where kind of all the stories you would read about Val Kilmer in the entertainment media was about how he was really difficult to work with and kind of not worth the trouble, especially as his box office started to go down as well. Sometimes you can get away with being an asshole if you're making the studios a lot of money. Yeah. But that didn't keep being the case with him. So
he had a pretty good 10-year run, though, hey? So it kind of makes sense why he got a big head, as a lot of these Hollywood personalities do. Because, starting with... What would you start with? Top Gun? Really?
To me, I love Top Secret, his first movie.
Right.
And then he, and he's a real genius. So it's kind of he starts and you think he might be a comic star. But then, obviously Top Gun, his third movie, is where he really starts to catapult into the next level.
Yeah. A lot of classics he makes. That Willow. You know what? I've never seen Willow. I have no interest in seeing Willow. You're not, is that blasphemous?
No, you're not missing much.
Okay,
you're fine. Yeah,
good. Well, now you can't even watch it. I think it's been completely deleted. Even the original Willow, I think, is deleted off Disney.
Oh, really?
Plus.
I knew the show had been deleted. I didn't know if the movie wasn't there anymore.
Yeah, I think the movie is gone too, just purely to not get people to think about the sequel that was deleted as well. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. But, he does True Romance. He does Tombstone. He was Doc Holliday in that movie. That movie's a banger. Yeah. And then, like you said, the at the time, one of the biggest movies of all time, Batman Forever. So, yeah, the guy, a little bit of an ego. But we like Val Kilmer. right?
We like Val Kilmer, and even that, like, that's the thing, like, that was his reputation at the time, and it is one of those questions where I wonder now how much it was earned and how much it was just an actor who takes his craft very seriously.
Yep.
And, wasn't, like, meshing with everyone, and, like, that happens, but it's not always as negative as we maybe hear. And he had his defenders even during that time, and I don't know if you watched that, like, recent documentary all about him, I think it's just called Val.
Yeah.
But it's really good, and he, like, goes into, like, talks about that like, time in his career, and he does come across in that as someone, he does seem like, just funnier and like a more normal guy than you would expect. But also just someone who is like, yes, I think I just took the craft so seriously that maybe it rubbed people the wrong way. I think, and he's very just kind of honest about that time. But I wonder if he was ever really the huge asshole we heard, or it was just like a matter of him not really, his style not fitting the style of the time and like the production style of the time. So it's probably a little bit of one and a little bit of the other. We'll never know the full truth, I'm sure.
I guess he did press the studio in this movie to have a lot more disguises, as the character is known for. He wanted more and more. But Paramount also owns Mission Impossible. So at the time, this is running congruently with the Mission Impossible series. The first Mission Impossible comes out in 1996. And again, a lot of face replacements, I guess, disguises for Tom Cruise's character. And Paramount is like, well, we'll keep doing your facial different disguises and whatnot, but they wanted to keep it really crude versus like a sophisticated disguise. So I guess that's where we'll talk about the movie, but Val Kilmer's disguises in this movie are cartoonish in a lot of ways.
The disguises are such fun. I mean, were they as much fun for you, or did they get to be kind of a pain after a while?
No, not at all. They were always fun. I always wanted to, some of them that were, we had to make adjustments or changing things. It was always that kind of scramble that was satisfying because it kept everybody entertained with the subject. This is the guy who really enjoys kind of all by himself. It's a private joke that he has. He has no boss, he has no partner, he has no country. And so that pleasure that he found is sort of parallel to what actors find fun about their job.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's watching this movie, it's kind of obvious why almost any actor would want this role, because you get to play all these different parts, you get to wear all these different disguises, do different voices. It's like, it is definitely a vanity project in and of itself.
Yeah.
And then I think that was probably the appeal to Val Kilmer, especially coming off of something like Batman Forever, which was a huge hit, as you said, I guess he felt was kind of limiting, because you're Batman, in that costume, and he found and especially that one, right, in Batman Forever, he was really overshadowed by like the villains and like everything else going on. And then I think so then he sees the Saint. It's brought to him. He's like, I get to wear funny noses. I get to do like makeup jobs. I get to play different voices. It must have just been so intriguing for him to just dive into it.
Do you like it well enough that you would do more of them if
Absolutely.
They asked
Yeah.
you? So this was a good choice to do this instead of another Batman.
I think so. I mean, have no regrets. The things that I found appealing about it are the audience is finding appealing. They've been doing a lot of screenings. He's a literary character, comes out of 60 books, and as opposed to a comic book, which I very much enjoy, but there's certain kind of sort of rigid rules to that kind of a story. And I like the freedom in this, very immediately appealing.
And especially a guy like him, too, who is like, there's probably always that little, how much am I famous for my looks, So, I think of guys like Brad Pitt who are like, they know they're like sex symbols, but they don't want to be. They're like, they're character actors at heart. And I think Val Kilmer has that a little bit, too. So I think maybe The Saint was like, not only obviously this like concerted effort to get away from like the trappings of being stuck as Batman, but also like, oh, maybe I can still get like that kind of blockbuster like money and like success, but get to like do more character actor-y stuff. So
get to
that was
stretch.
probably like
Stretch.
That was like the intriguing part of it for him. Yeah,
totally. Well, I think that's honestly a great place to just move into the movie proper, because there's not a lot of behind the scenes on this.
We don't know shit about the character of the show.
No, and like usually, you actually watch an episode of the TV show we're covering.
I slacked.
But you did. You slacked. You dropped the ball. And usually, I think
doesn't
better
usually
of you. But
it's not always October. I have Halloween shit to watch. I can't be watching Roger Moore shows. What do you?
Okay, let's talk about the movie.
Okay.
A man without a name can never be identified.
We've got a handful of false identities used on visas, passports.
My name is Bruno Rautenfaust.
Milanovic.
I'm Tony St. Hubbins.
A man who doesn't exist can never be caught.
I've been chasing him for nearly 2 years.
He eluded a hit squad this morning in Holland Park.
A man who doesn't love can never truly be alive.
This woman has discovered something that will revolutionize the world.
It's a formula for creating energy.
You will steal it for me.
How did you do that?
Magic. When we master this technology, then we dictate terms to the West.
Give it up! You got no place to go!
I escaped. I always escape.
Paramount Pictures presents
Nicholas Owen, Louis Guanella, Peter Damien.
All the names of Catholic saints.
a story about betrayal.
You've got to get away from me.
I'm not going anywhere until you tell me why you lied to me.
You don't know what you're dealing with here.
Redemption.
I can't trust anybody. I never have.
And destiny.
Kill him.
And bring her alive.
If you want to live, never leave my side.
From the director of Clear and Present Danger and Patriot Games.
The army must be mobilized.
The balance of power is about to shift.
Val Kilmer.
Tell me you love me.
Elizabeth Shue.
Who are you?
The Saint.
Well, listeners, before we get into the plot and the review proper, we gotta discuss what the hell has transpired over the last 24 hours of us trying to record this podcast for you. We went through more recording platforms than disguises.
We are like the saint of podcasting.
You guys have no idea what we've gone through to bring this episode to you. Not even
all the Noyce heads, all the saint heads. I hope you're happy because we are really putting in the work for this episode.
So that whole like half hour or whatever you heard, we were riddled with connection problems.
Yeah.
That hopefully you have no idea that happened because of the magic of editing. But oh boy, me and Trev, he kept dropping out. I kept dropping out. We wanted to smash our computers against the wall here, but holy shit. We moved from a different platform. We're now on Zoom. So I think we really hope that the quality is up to par that what we aspire to be and what we have been for the last few years. So if it is a little tingy or whatever, I apologize, or we apologize.
Sounds a little different. There is a reason. We apologize. But as I always like to say, it's still free. Keep that in mind. It's still a free podcast. So
it is. What's not free is the amount of time that we took to put this together.
This is our first ever 2-day episode. This is the first time we've ever recorded an episode over 2 days.
Yes, and almost became a 3-day ordeal. Became 3 days because we were having problems today as well until we just kind of bucked up and said, let's try Zoom. And it's working.
Yeah, we'll see.
For now. Anyway, okay. On to the plot, first and foremost. Simon Templar has no real family, no real home, and Simon Templar isn't even his real name. Yet, Simon Templar, also known as the Saint for his use of false identities using the names of Catholic saints, is one of the world's most successful thieves. Slick, debonair, and a master of disguise. Simon manages to outwit the police again and again. On his next job, he is hired by the Russian mafia to steal a cold fusion energy formula from the scientist Dr. Emma Russell. However, the mission backfires as he falls for the young woman. Simon and his new love must now outwit the Russian mafia and complete the energy formula before the worst happens and the world is affected forever.
The Saint, yes, great synopsis. It felt like I was reading the TNT Sunday afternoon viewing of it, Or so, Chris, I'm going to let you go first on this one. I know this is like a first time watch for both of us, and as I said, this is kind of it's interesting because for both of us, this is our like introduction to the Saint as a character in a franchise. So I'm curious to, as someone, both of us have no past history with the character, with the Roger Moore show or anything. How was this movie as your introduction to the world of the Saint?
So, as you know, Trev, I was on vacation for the last couple weeks.
Yeah.
And I was away overseas, and when you come back home, you are riddled with jet lag, right?
Yeah.
So I was very, very tired. And I was like, oh man, I got to get this episode because we have a recording session that is scheduled.
Glad this all worked out.
Yeah, it all worked out perfectly. But I'll say it to you this way. This is not the best movie to watch when you are jet lagged.
Wow. Elaborate on that, Chris.
Yes. For a movie that is, well, I'm going to do two comps, okay? And I'm going to combine them. One is the Dana Carvey Master of Disguise movie.
Okay.
Okay. And one is a movie we covered on this podcast called The Thomas Crown Affair.
Yeah.
Now, if you combine those two movies, you get this movie, but also just dreadfully boring. I found this movie very, very boring. It has such a fun concept that this thief is having a riot, doing his own thing and coming up with voices and doing his characters and having a blast, trying to get his way. And it also sets up this romance that I say in quotation fingers with Elizabeth Shue, the great Elizabeth Shue, which we will talk about more in depth once you get your thoughts out. I just found this movie really poorly executed in tone, that I didn't exactly know if it was trying to be funny or if it was just coming off a little bit more embarrassing. And also, like, the romance is just like, I mentioned the Thomas Crown Affair because that's like one of the sexiest movies of all time. And this movie is trying to be sexy, but also kind of falling on its face. So I found this movie just so boring. And for a subject matter like this that should be so fun, that I'm so excited to see Simon Templar. What character is he going to be next? Oh, what kind of goofy accent is he going to do next? And it's just I could not wait for this to be over. And I'm not trying to say it's one of the worst movies we've talked about. I won't say that. But it's definitely one of the most boring. And I'm sure there's reasons why in depth that we will discuss. So I will throw it to you. Throw on your fake nose and mustache and different pair of glasses. And who are you?
I actually have those. I actually already had those on. I'm going to pull them off now. It's the big reveal. Yeah, boring is definitely a great word to use to describe this movie. Obviously this is Noyce-vember, right? So the question that will hover over our discussion for both of these two films we're going to look at this month, I guess, is a question of like his directorial skills. Is he like, we're talking about two failed franchise starters, right? And the question becomes, is Phillip Noyce the problem? Did he do a bad job directing these? And I don't know if I'm ready to say that here. I don't know if I would blame this on Phillip Noyce, because I think this is not, we already talked about this in the first half hour of this podcast. I don't know that you hire him to be like super stylistic with this movie necessarily, as much as you're like, the concept is there, right? You just got to do like a serviceable job. And I think the directing is serviceable. I think some of the performances are serviceable. I think there's one really good performance that would be Elizabeth Shue. As you said, we'll talk more about her. But to me, there's two things that are like the fatal flaws for this film ultimately. One being that I know, and I'm sure you do too from our research, that there was a whole different ending originally that was changed at a certain point because of test screenings.
Yeah.
And they came back for reshoots and entirely did the third act. And we'll talk about what that original ending was, or just like the general idea of it in a little bit. But I do think it's amazing that when they changed it, they decided to make the bold decision to, hey, what if like this is, it's funny, I said Phillip Noyce is never an experimental or artistic filmmaker, But when they decided to change the ending, he did have a very experimental thought. What if you have an action movie that just has no action at the end? What if the last act is just people standing on a stage and talking and no big action scene? And the fact that I know now that they cut out what sounds like it might have been like an exciting action scene at the end is even more frustrating because the movie
and an emotional crux.
Yes, that too. And for this to also be like this movie like kind of rewrites the whole idea of the saint and turns this into like a saint origin story that I know was invented for this movie. And it doesn't work, right? Because you can tell what the script was trying to set up is gone now. And so like that emotional crux is gone, the action is gone. The movie's just been plodding along anyways, but I kind of had this thought that if this ends in like a cool third act, I'll forgive how kind of boring the first two like thirds were, but it doesn't, right? And the reason the first two thirds don't work is my other big problem. And that is, look, like we said, we didn't come to bury Val Kilmer. I'm a Val Kilmer fan. I do think he's miscast in this.
Yeah.
I think I like Val Kilmer. And as we said, like he had a really good run for a while before this. I know this was coming, he had the rough year before this. We talked about Island Doc Moreau, Dead Girl, and Ghost in the Darkness. This could have been a comeback film, right? Yeah, that would be the hope. Especially like, oh, I'm walking away from Batman to do this instead. Okay, there must be something here, right? But the thing is, I do like Val Kilmer. I think Val Kilmer is sometimes even underrated as an actor, certainly overhated, as we talked about. And I know this is going to be a weird comment because earlier I said that I love Top Secret and I kind of like Real Genius. He started as a comedic guy. But what's a word I would never use to describe Val Kilmer in general? Playful. I think Val Kilmer is a serious, like his performances he's better when he's playing like more tortured characters, more serious characters. And I know this version of Simon Templar is supposed to be tortured because of something that happened in his past. But then the movie is like kind of wants us to find his disguises and everything really goofy and fun.
Yeah.
And Val Kilmer is just not the guy for that. So I was really trying to think about like who would be the better version of this. It's weird because we talked about how they wanted Ray Fiennes and Hugh Grant also, and I don't see either of them pulling this off either. I was really kind of like, well, maybe you and I can talk about this. I was racking my brain to think about like what 90s stars would have been good at this. And I know one of the names I saw that was also tossed around, and I know this is problematic nowadays. We're getting into dicey territory, but I saw like Johnny Depp as one of the names. And I was like, ooh, that probably would have worked better, right? Like this era, Johnny Depp probably could have, like, he would have had the lightness and the goofiness that I think this movie requires to be a little more entertaining, and Val Kilmer doesn't. Anytime Val Kilmer's trying to be funny in this and anytime it's trying to be goofy, it's more distracting and you're kind of like embarrassed for him and embarrassed for the movie, right?
That's
what sunk it for me.
Well, for sure. And that's what goes back to my thing about tone. Val Kilmer is inherently, as you're saying, kind of stoic and tortured. Like you're so right. You just think of his portrayal of Bruce Wayne, right? In Batman Forever. He's kind of a sad sack in that movie, right? And when you see Val Kilmer, you see like, you don't want to blame him for being typecast in that role, but like his voice, the way he looks, the way he carries himself does go well with that portrayal of a character. So when you throw him with the goofy teeth on and a bad comb over and he's doing a stupid voice, you do feel embarrassed and you do not understand if this movie is trying to be dramatic or if it's trying to be silly. And this movie needed to pick a lane. If it wanted to be silly, be fucking silly, bro. But it doesn't because it gets too wrapped up in Russian politics and cold fusion technology, and it just gets too big for its britches in a lot of ways. And Kilmer is convincing enough. It's in snippets, in snippets he's convincing enough, but it's unintentionally funny, and I don't think when you're laughing, you're supposed like I wouldn't even say that I was laughing. I just think I was like, ugh.
Yeah. Well, no, and the fact that you said unintentionally funny, that's the key, right? Because you wish it was intentionally funny, but it's not. Because this definitely feels, again, and I know we're a little bit talking out of our ass because neither of us have seen the show, but I have to imagine a 60s like show called The Saint with Roger Moore probably was fairly campy and had a sense of like fun and frivolity to it. And this strikes me as, we've talked about this before, right? There was a lot of these like 90s reboots of like past properties. We talked about like even like Lost in Space, and I brought this up. And I know we disagree on that film, but we both agreed on it was like kind of key that like in the 90s they were like, oh, let's take those campy things and make them more serious.
Yeah.
And that's definitely what this feels like, right? Even to the idea of giving the saint this like tragic backstory where it's like, oh, he watched this girl he was in love with as a young boy fall to her death, and now he's like tortured by it. And like Simon Templar's not even his real name, and we're gonna make that like a point of where did that name come from and why is he called the saint? And it's all this like traumatic stuff, you know?
But isn't
And
it
it's
isn't it
just
so funny that his childhood crush falls to her death? So
which,
he
by the way, was
decides.
one of the biggest laughs in the movie for me. I'm
Oh
sorry, but
yes,
it
same.
was so unexpected. So we should like the movie starts with him as a young kid, like in this like home for like like wayward children or whatever, run by the
Yeah,
church.
yeah.
And he's like the little troublemaker there. He's always getting he gets all everybody else in trouble, but they forgive him because they basically like say nobody can have dinner until he like apologizes for what he did. But
Hmm.
he's like already like this like little like roustabout, and he like figures out how to like unlock the cage that they're keeping all their food in. Which, by the way, wild. They have the food in like a cage. He unlocks it, gives it to all the kids, and then he's like making his like escape later. And there's this little blonde girl, and so I know that Elizabeth Shue's in this movie. I
Yep.
know that I read the plot description was that it's about the saint like falling in love with some like scientist that he's hired to steal from. And I'm like, I did you have the same thought? I'm like, oh, that little
Yes,
girl's gonna grow up to
immediately.
be Elizabeth Shue. They're gonna like reconnect, in the future. And then suddenly the little girl falls to her death. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but it was like it's so funny and so unexpected, and even just filmed like again, not comedically, but I was reminded of remember when Conan O'Brien used to have the Walker Texas Ranger lever, and he had that one scene with that little kid who like falls from the
Yeah.
bookshelf, and his
Oh
dad's gonna catch
yes.
him, but then moves aside. That's what it was like. That's what it reminded me of. So I was just like, as soon as that girl fell to her death, I don't know. That was like a legit laugh from me. But
Oh, for sure. And again, think of it this way: his childhood crush dies, so
mhm.
he decides to become a thief and play
Yeah, I
dress
know.
up for the
It
rest of
does
his
not.
life.
It does not track.
Like the trauma doesn't match the reaction.
Yeah.
Like I would understand if he became Batman from
hmm
that. Sure, okay, fine.
Been there, done
But
that, though.
yeah, exactly. Now he like I said, he's got to put in goofy teeth and long hair and pretend he's Russian. It's just like,
Yeah.
you know what it reminded me of too? The new movie, is it from this year? That Hitman movie with Glenn Powell.
Yeah. This year. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt like this movie was just like a series of vignettes for Val Kilmer to play dress up. And
Yeah.
I also felt the same about that movie as well. That movie I
Yeah.
didn't really work for either of us, I think, if
No.
I remember correctly.
And yeah.
But
I thought it was fine. I just understand like the crazy hype about it.
yes, and same here. Like I thought it was fun to get Glenn Powell play against type in these like series of joking scenes and whatever, but the movie as a whole just didn't work. And I felt
Yeah.
like this was very reminiscent in that sense. Also, I want to say I'm gonna keep bringing up the Thomas Crown affair because if
It's a
you
great
haven't,
comp. It's a great comp. I'm with you.
thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. I appreciate your. I don't get many accolades from you, so
Hey, 90s thief movie. Yeah, it makes
yeah.
sense, right? Yeah.
And especially since there's a mystery to Simon Templar, like there is a mystery to Thomas Crown. The difference is if you want to, it goes to the question that we've been posing in this podcast, that does this deserve sequels? And right away, I'll tell you this version, no, it doesn't. And it's because when you watch a movie like this with Simon Templar as a character or a Thomas Crown, you have to ask yourself two questions. One is Simon cool? And also, number two, do I want to be Simon? Like, do I want to be this cool character that can be anywhere, be anybody, and get the girl and get the jewels and all that shit? This movie, he's just a guy, you know,
Yeah.
and I just do not care about seeing any more adventures with Val Kilmer's version of Simon Templar.
It's strange because like I know that like Val Kilmer came to play, right? Like, and we said I get what the attraction was. He's like, oh, I get to do all these funny costumes, all these different accents. Um, but it's like he showed up for the wrong version of this movie, and ironically, like I think they cast him for like what should have been the right version, but he brought like the wrong energy. It's really
Yeah.
weird because the thing about Val Kilmer is Val Kilmer can be cool, right? Val Kilmer is an interesting screen presence, but he's best at playing these characters who are enigmatic and kind of dangerous. right?
Yes,
Like
yes.
where he's cool in a scary way. I mean, like Doc Holliday has some funny lines, but he's also like very tragic, right? He's this like he's dying. He's this drunk. He doesn't, he's kind of refuses to admit his problems. Like we said, his version of Bruce Wayne is actually quite tortured for how goofy everything else is in that
Hmm.
movie. You think of Chris and Heat and just how that's like a very like dark character because of how messed up his home life is. Um, and then it's like, so when they decide to make the serious version of the Saint, right, where they're like, okay, we'll take the Saint and we'll reveal that his best friend, this girl he liked, died when he was young, and that he comes from this like broken, he's an orphan, and he comes from this broken past. I understand Val Kilmer being the right choice for that. The problem is the rest of the movie requires him to put in like buck teeth and like a comb over
Yeah.
and like a funny nose and play like a sexy like poet that romances Elizabeth Shue. These two things don't match. Like
No.
you're right. Val Kilmer is the right choice for a serious, tortured spy movie, I think. But he's not the right choice for one that's trying to do that. And then also say, and now here's also Val Kilmer, comic master. The two just don't go together. And that's what kept like keeping me at like a distance from this for sure.
It's wild. I'm looking at Val Kilmer's filmography right now after The Saint.
Oh, this
And
was like the last.
this was it.
It's yeah,
This
this
was
was
it.
it. Yep. Hmm.
Like I actually forgot that he didn't really have a semblance of a comeback until Kiss Kiss Bang Bang.
So I remember
Um,
the one like in between there is I remember in 2003 Wonderland, the movie where he played John Holmes about the Wonderland murders.
okay, yeah, yeah.
Not a huge financial hit, but I remember it was like acclaimed enough that it was like, ooh, this is like Val Kilmer's first like really interesting performance in like a long time. Is he back? Is he back? And I remember watching the movie and be like, oh yeah, he's really good in this. And then nothing, right? And he keeps
Yeah.
having these like little like mini like movies like even before that like The Salton Sea and then later Spartan. Like he would have these like interesting performances in smaller movies, but yeah, nothing. And even Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, we say that it's a comeback, but that got like Robert Downey Jr.'s career rolling again, but it did not for Val Kilmer, really.
No, no, it didn't.
No.
It's kind of wild.
He never came back in the same way,
Whoa, 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 whoa. No, hold on. He was uncredited in The Love Guru, an F2F movie that I know is your favorite.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's actually quite wild. Val Kilmer kind of fell off the map for me. Obviously, everybody else, it seems that way now that I'm looking. But, I know he's got an illness and kind of obviously that affected him. But when was he diagnosed with that?
I can't remember the year. I didn't look at, but
Because you're right. There's a good 15 years after this movie where it's just a bunch of junk.
well, like we said, there's like two things about that, right? So first of all, it's that his box office, like he had like four kind of like box office bombs in a row, but also like his reputation was just getting out there, And even
Totally.
like, and I understand that like Michael Keaton, yeah, well, that's actually a good point because like even when Michael Keaton walks away from Batman, he has a long time until he has like a comeback, right?
Hmm.
Val Kilmer walks away from Batman after only one movie. I know this is kind of. Do you agree that Hollywood is kind of vindictive and like the idea of like walking away from a giant franchise? I think that like made them like mad at him too. It's almost like,
Oh,
why are we going to hire you if you're just going to do one movie and then take off? So that didn't help either. And then I mentioned earlier I was going to allude to something that like a famous story about Val Kilmer. It was during this movie. I couldn't remember if it was this or Island of Dr. Moreau, but then I was looking at the trivia of this. This was the movie where he allegedly like flicked a lit cigarette at a cameraman's eye.
oh my
Like,
God.
have you ever heard that story? Like, that was
No,
like,
I
I remember
haven't.
that was like a big deal. Like, they were like, oh yeah, Val Kilmer like tried to put out his cigarette on this guy's like eye or whatever. This was the movie where that happened, and
Oh,
that's like
geez.
it got into like the entertainment media and everyone ran with it. So it was just like this guy's like off his rocker, like he's hard to work with. He's assaulting people now. In the same trivia thing I read, it talked about how like Elizabeth Shue and the producer both like denied that. And this is what I was saying. Like, it's two sides to every story. They
Yeah.
both said that like, oh no, that didn't happen. He was great. Elizabeth Shue said she loved working with him. She was like happy to come back for the reshoots later. So who knows? And like I said, he comes across so humble and everything in that Val documentary, but that also is as you just alluded to, that's a Val Kilmer who had a horrifying health scare and almost
Yeah.
died.
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
assume he's a different person today than he was during this time too, which makes sense.
I want to kind of go back to what you said about Hollywood being vindictive.
Hmm.
Earlier in the podcast, I dropped a clip of an interviewer of him on the press tour talking to a reporter, and the reporter even kind of slyly says like, like, well, I would like to see more of these if you want to be in them more. Also, was this a good idea to leave Batman for this? And it's funny because, what is he supposed to say to that question? Number one. But also, it is kind of wild to think that somebody gets the keys to the the keys to the Batcave, and decides no. And I understand George Clooney also did One and Done, but that's, there's more to that story too. But
I don't think he was even offered another one,
Exactly. And like what you said earlier, when we recorded fucking a week ago or whatever it was, you said that Batman Forever was like the highest opening weekend of all time or something, like when it came out. So, he's got the keys to the Batcave and he just says no.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's balls to that, obviously. Like there's something that I can respect, of course, but also what you doing?
You're certainly not playing the game, right? And Hollywood does not respect that. The even better like comp to all this is George Lazenby, right? Same thing.
Yes.
George Lazenby is hired as the new James Bond after Sean Connery does one, and then his like team talks him out of doing any more, and he walks away. And guess what? Hollywood is like, are you serious? All right, well, you are a nobody now for the rest of your career. I'm sorry. I hope you like being like fifth build in B movies from now on, because you don't get handed that franchise, and we don't put all of our faith and all of our money into you for you to just do one and be like, nah, I'm good. That's just not the way it works. And I think that's true with Val Kilmer as well. And then to try, and like there's probably isn't something about like trying to jump from one franchise into another that would piss them off even more, So yeah. It's too bad. Like it is really too bad that he didn't get to come back in like a bigger way, because I feel like we probably did miss out on a few decades there of like, more interesting Val Kilmer lead performances in bigger movies. But unfortunately that's the way it rolls sometimes. I do see though, we will talk about him again. We will eventually do the movie The Snowman, in which I see he plays a character named Gert Rafto. So I'm already excited about this. And I know that it's great enough he plays Gert Rafto, and I know the main character of that movie is Michael Fassbender plays the character Harry Hole. So boy, The Snowman.
Nice.
I'm coming someday. Yeah.
Whose career thankfully wasn't super hurt by this movie, and I think for reasons like you said earlier, is Elizabeth Shue. She
trying so hard to give this movie some life.
I know, right? Yeah. And I gotta say, so Elizabeth Shue, I know over all these years, me and you both will talk about who we had crushes on and certain actresses that we are drawn to. I'm pretty sure in saying this that Elizabeth Shue was my absolute original crush, stemming from Adventures in Babysitting. And I think I was like that perfect age of those kids, that she was looking after. And she is just, I mean, obviously she's an incredible actress. I don't want to just talk about her looks. You know what I mean? I don't want to sound piggish, but I will say that, Elizabeth Shue is like the natural beauty benchmark for me and Hollywood. Like she is just gorgeous. And she's like one of those gorgeous people you see like in a mall. You know what I mean? Like she's like, there's Margot Robbie, and then there's Catherine Zeta-Jones, and obviously there's like otherworldly hot out there, but like Elizabeth Shue is just, she's so inviting. And I just love seeing her on screen.
That's the way.
Cute as a button. You're so right. Like I just love seeing her on screen. She's so inviting. Even when she's a fucking weirdo psychopath in The Boys, I'm just like, oh man, I just love seeing her on my screen.
Suddenly, you had a little like I'll try that breast milk. Is that what you're?
You know what? Yeah.
Hopefully, our listeners watch The Boys and understand that comment.
But no, Elizabeth Shue, it's funny because there was an ongoing gag at work for many, many years, and my coworker would always say, "Hey, your girl's in this show. Hey, your girl's in this movie," and it was always Elizabeth Shue. So,
I mean, look, as you like to point out, I'm a little older than you, but like as a child of the '80s, I think she was just a crush for all of us, right? Between Karate Kid, Adventures of Babysitting, then Back to the Future 2 and 3, Elizabeth Shue is just if you were growing up in the '80s. You had a crush on Elizabeth Shue. And that's what's funny about her character in this, because she definitely, one of my favorite like Hollywood bad tropes, this movie suffers from it. The oh, she's not hot because she wears glasses, trope.
Yeah.
So she plays this like scientist who has come up with the formula for cold fusion, and that's kind of like that's like the MacGuffin of this movie. The saint is well, he's not the saint yet. Simon Templar is hired by a Russian. Let's just we already kind of said this in your plot thing. He's hired to steal the cold fusion formula from this guy who's trying to take over Russia, and they play it as like he seduces her to get the formula. He poses as this like long-haired, like I guess French poet that seduces her at an art museum. And then they have this whole thing where she's like, "Oh, I can't believe this guy is interested. Guys never talk to me." And it's like, "Oh, okay, I get you're wearing glasses. I get you're giggly.
I get you're a nerd.
You're Elizabeth Shue. I'm sorry. Every straight man and every gay woman who comes within 10 feet of you is not going to be put off by your glasses. In fact, they just make you look even more cute." So that was a little like eye roll worthy. But as we said, she is injecting so much life in all of her scenes because it's not like a deep character on the page, right? They give her like a heart condition that ultimately does not play into the movie at all. It means nothing, probably again because of the changed ending. But she has this heart condition and whatever, and like so. But whether that matters, whatever. She's just like basically like the scientist and the love interest. But what Elizabeth Shue does that's really interesting is she plays it like so socially awkward and like she's always kind of like giggling and like out of breath and like
a schoolyard crush.
Yeah, and like taken aback by everything that's happening with her. Like her introduction scene is her giving a lecture to a bunch of students at a school about her cold fusion formula. And again, that could just be like a boring lecture scene. And she plays it like she's nervous about giving the lecture. And then when someone finally asks her a question, she's so excited to answer that she's kind of like stumbling over herself a little bit. And it's just like, oh my God, she feels like a real living person.
Yes.
And she feels like a person that like, yeah, everybody would fall in love with. And that's the one thing I'll give the movie is there's this idea of he's been doing this for years, right? He shut himself off from the world and emotions because of what happened to his friend when he was younger. He's just this thief. He's in it for money. And this is the first time he's ever like fallen in love with someone and he's questioning what he does. And I go like, that I believe because it's Elizabeth Shue and the way she's performing it, I believe he would fall for her, even though this movie has that thing too. It's got two great tropes. It's the she's not hot because she has glasses, and also they fall in love like within 24 hours and are just willing to risk everything for each other. Okay. But I kind of believe it with her. So,
and that's the thing, though,
I do like her. I thought she was actually really good in this.
The issue is you believe that he's falling for her.
Yes.
But do you believe she's falling for him?
Not for a second. In fact, at every moment, both I and Liz, as we watched it, were just like, run. Get away from this guy. Like, and not because and we're not talking from the context of understanding that he's actually planning to steal the formula from her. We're talking because the character he creates to seduce her is creepy as fuck. He's just like comes across as like this bizarre stalker, and like his poetry is bad, which by the way, I read that Val Kilmer wrote all that poetry himself, which is very funny.
Classic.
But it's just like he is not, it's not seductive at all. And that's the thing again, where you said earlier, this movie needed to pick a lane. Imagine if the movie was just trying to be funny and like played it that funny, like where it's like he's so like ridiculous and then she still falls for him. That'd be like a good gag. But the movie wants us to believe, oh no, he's like a Fabio romantic character that women would fall for. And again, you're just like, no, the nose looks stupid. He's creepy. It's like ridiculous. Oh, you know what? You know what just popped into my head? I was saying I don't know who should play this character at this time. It just clicked with me when I said the thing about the fake nose and everything. I just remembered and from this time period, I think it's appropriate. You know who would have been great in this if they leaned into the comedy more? Brendan Fraser.
Ooh, yeah, totally.
Brendan Fraser is the saint because think about Bedazzled, where he does all the different like makeup jobs and characters, and then put that into this movie. That would have been awesome. So that's
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yep.
Okay. Before we talk about the lame villains, our boy came to play. Our boy
Graham
came to play. Graham Revell.
Score horror, section giving one of the most Graham Revell-ish of Graham Revell scores.
Yes, you know what?
I didn't even need to see his name in the credits. You play me 30 seconds. I go, oh, our boy Graham is here.
Yeah. You get your lame ass, forgettable '90s techno rock. Graham, good for you.
Yeah.
You did it.
You did it. Yeah. Well, even beside the score, right? This movie is it's from 1997, and the overall soundtrack is about as 1997 as it gets.
Oh yes.
This is when Hollywood was all in on this techno electronica. This is going places. There's a hilarious scene where like they're being chased by like the villains, by the underlings. and every time we cut to the underling's car, they're like blaring techno really loud, but they do it as like diegetic music. So like whenever like we cut away from them, the music goes away, and then it comes back. You're like, oh my god, these bad guys are actually just like listening to like this like lame ass Prodigy ripoff or whatever. Like in there, yeah.
For the listener, the film's soundtrack, okay, The Saint, music from the motion picture soundtrack. Duran Duran, Moby, Fluke, Luscious Jackson, The Chemical Brothers, Daft Punk, David Bowie, Dreadzone, Duncan Sheik, Everything But the Girl. Do you know who that is?
Yeah. I mean, I know most of these just because I was a teenager around this time. Yeah.
Sure. But yeah, the full-on electronica age, that's for sure. Very, very 90s.
Yeah.
Very, very 90s.
Yep.
Okay. You're speaking about the villains, listening to all this music. The villains. We get. I'll say his name. Okay, I got his name.
Yeah, because I say here comes the moment that like any movie podcaster whose first language is English gets like nervous having to say this.
Yes.
So I'm glad you're gonna go for it.
So I always think of this guy as the Chimera virus guy from Mission Impossible 2. That's who I always think of. But this is the actor Raid Serbedzja. I
actually think you're doing pretty well on the last name. I got nervous about this, so I went and watched a YouTube
okay.
Yeah, I went and watched a YouTube interview with him where they introduced him. And pronounce the last name again. What were you saying?
Serbedzja.
I think you're pretty close. I think, and I always said Raid too, but in this they said Roddy or like Rade. And I was like, oh, okay. So like Rade Serbedzja. Like that's what I would run with. But even then they like said it and then they go, is that even close? And he was like, not too bad. So I don't know. He might just be being nice. But
this guy, listeners, you've seen him in a million things. He's got like over 200 acting credits. Fuck,
you said of him as like the Chimera guy, but for me, I think for a lot of people, he will always be Boris the Blade from Snatch.
Oh yeah, that's
definitely where I first noticed him. And yeah, he's kind of like, he's Croatian, and you're gonna know what I mean as soon as I say this. To me, I was thinking of him as like Croatian Peter Stormare, where he's just
totally.
He's just one of those guys like Peter Stormare, where he's never the main guy, and he's always in these small roles, but he shows up and you go, all right, I'm in a pretty good mood now. Like he's I just like this guy. I pitched a movie years ago because he's in Batman Begins as the guy that Bruce Wayne gives his coat to. And he, of course, says like, he's like, nice coat, or no, nice jacket, right? Nice jacket. And then he gives him the jacket. And then later Batman sees him wearing it and goes, nice jacket, and flies off. And I always thought they should make a spinoff about him where it's revealed that Bruce Wayne already had some like initial Batman blueprints like in the jacket that he forgot about. And now this homeless guy has like found those plans, and he's like it's just this guy like building like a homemade Batman suit. I still think that'd be a great idea, but
yeah, it'd be good.
Yeah, no one wouldn't take my calls, so
of course not. Sometimes I don't even take your calls.
I know,
but I again, we love this actor. We do not love this villain.
No.
Ivan Tretiak, and I believe his brother Ilya Tretiak.
Is it his brother or his son?
You know what? Who cares?
Yeah, you know what? Right answer.
These are the most forgettable nothing burger Russian fucking mafia characters. And as Trev said earlier, there is no like action comeuppance for them. So it's like, if you're going to have a spy thriller, you really do need a villain you just fucking hate. You want Simon Templar to take down these guys. Yeah. And I just felt like this movie kept cutting back and forth between, Simon and his stupid, makeup and voice and hair to Ivan and Ilya, like mad about, Simon doing stuff. You know what I mean? Like they never really cross paths enough.
No, and there's even like, again, I know you hate when I rewrite movies, but there's so many like instances where the movie seems like it could almost become more interesting because the first mission we see him on as an adult is stealing like a microchip from them, right? Because like Ivan Tretiak, he's this like Russian like public figure who is trying to like usurp the current Russian government by he's like kind of declaring that the current president of Russia is the reason that the people don't have any fuel and everyone is like freezing to death. And he's like, I will bring you your fuel and everything. Oh, I hope that's not problematic that I did that. So Simon steals this microchip from them, and then they hire him to like get the cold fusion formula from Elizabeth Shue. And it's actually the scene where they hire him is kind of interesting because he like poses like this like in between. He's like, "Oh, I'm the person you talk to get to Simon Templar," and they immediately know it's him, which is kind of funny because like again, like the movie is instantly telling you that some of his disguises are just like obvious and people can see through them. But even in that scene where they're like, he just stole from them. He like fought the son, right? Or the brother, whichever, Ilya. He had a fight with them, like almost, they like were fighting to the death almost. And then now they're like hiring him. I was kind of like, oh, this is interesting. If like the rest of the movie is like him like working with them now, like that's a cool like little like turn. And then as soon as he walks away, they immediately go, too bad we'll have to kill him. I was like, oh no, okay, never mind. It's as boring as I thought. So yeah. Oh, I will say though, that character led to my only other like really big like legit laugh. And again, neither of my laughs were meant to be laughs, but I said one was when a small girl dies. And then my second laugh, because I know you and I love scenes like this, there was one of these in the Mod Squad as well, when bad guys say stuff too loud that they shouldn't.
Yes.
There's a great moment later where like we don't even see it. It's like you can tell it's probably like added in like post or something. But there's like a scene where like Ivan is like talking to someone else, and they're like, talking about how like, yeah, this whole thing, the only reason he's like gaining traction and like the taking over the Russian government is because people are mad at the president for there being no fuel and no gas. And like they have a scene where Ivan goes, "Oh, good thing people don't know I have all the gas in the basement under my castle." It's like, oh God, why would he say that?
It's bad. It's all bad. It's all boring. It's all too silly and also too dramatic at the same time, and nothing comes together in any meaningful way. And there's really two things I want to talk about before jumping into the changes to that ending, because what he says in that moment is kind of alluding to the old ending that was never shot.
Yeah. Well, just like I said, like Elizabeth Shue's whole heart condition, right, is also alluding to that ending.
Totally.
And and does not play out. So yeah, they could have gone back and changed some things after they changed the ending, but oh well, I guess they didn't have the time.
I'll give an accolade that this was a good use of Russian locations. That was kind of cool. That there was a lot of on locations. Hold on. There's a lot of
shooting.
On location shooting. If shitting.
Probably that too.
Yeah, okay. I might keep this in. But there was a lot of on location shooting in Russia, which is something that I think we will never ever get again.
I wouldn't recommend it. Yeah.
No. So that was kind of cool. Also, I did not expect this movie to have a big blue light in sky climax. That was interesting to me.
Not the same kind of big blue light in the sky climax but
close.
Close.
If aliens came down from the sky, it would have made it a lot better. I'll say that.
It's so dumb too, because I mean, like you're talking about that scene where they like turn on the cold fusion machine.
Yeah.
If people haven't seen the movie, they won't know what I mean. But trust me when I say it's so stupid. How quickly like the entire like Russian populace just accepts like, oh, he turned on a machine and it lit up. He must be telling the truth. That must be like that's going to save us all. They just all immediately accept it. Yeah.
Speaking of accepting something, one other thing I just remembered. Remember at the beginning where Simon's on the top of a roof and he's wearing a mustache?
Yes.
And then he jumps off the roof and he takes his mustache off midair. That had to have been a mistake, right? Like that had to have been a mistake in coverage, that they definitely filmed his landing without the mustache. And
you don't think it's just that you don't think that's just like that they wrongly, I'll point out, they thought like, oh, it'd be so cool looking if he takes off the mustache in midair.
I mean, either way, I'd be happy.
Yeah.
But man, when he did that, again, if this movie was sillier on purpose,
I know. And there's like, it would have worked. Like when you talk about this movie, you realize a lot of what we're saying makes it sound like it's like kind of like a funny, bad movie, but it's not. It's just boring. But there are elements where you think it would be funny. Like I said, like even the fact of like, he steals this form. So he seduces Elizabeth Shue as this different character, right? He poses as this poet, seduces her, sleeps with her. And then after they have sex and they fall asleep, she falls asleep, he takes the formula, right? And leaves a note for her saying, sorry. And then she like helps the police try to find him after that. But then when she finds him, she just kind of like immediately forgives him because she's still got the hots for him. Okay. I don't believe that. You know what else I don't believe? The whole thing is like, we find out she's got the formula on like 5 different scraps of paper and she always keeps them in her bra, which is like, the movie's just like, oh, I guess this is a chance for us to see Elizabeth Shue in a bra, which no one's going to turn down, I suppose.
Yep,
but like
no
when he steals the formula, he like takes a picture of it and sends it to the bad guys and they give it to their scientists and he goes, well, it doesn't work because I don't know the order of these scraps. And then
get her boobs.
So, but then he like, then he has to like go back to her and be like, what's the order? And she's even like, I don't know. I have to like take those scraps and I have to like figure it out. I haven't quite figured it out yet. I'm like, wait a minute, what? She's the one who created this formula. She created cold fusion that works, but she doesn't know exactly what order the formula she made goes in on these like pieces that are, it just, it's ridiculous. And like, again, if the movie was stupid, I would accept that. But because the movie's trying to be serious, it's like, it makes you angry. I don't know. It's like, that's the
Yeah.
only way I can put it. Yeah.
Maybe Dr. Emma Russell is on the spectrum, and maybe you are rude.
It could be. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Just got a bit of the tism. Okay. Okay, let's talk about the ending. That changed. The original ending. Should we give them spoilers, I guess, but should we tell them how the ending goes in the movie first before telling them the correction?
I don't give a shit about, I'm not worried about spoiling the Saint for people.
Okay,
So we said the movie is like, this is kind of written to be an origin of the Saint. So he is this like high profile professional burglar for years who like steals from, mostly villains, but kind of steals from anybody just to get like whatever money. People are paying him to steal things for them. And then he gets involved in this like whole case, gets hired to steal cold fusion from Elizabeth Shue. But then when they decide they want to like kill Elizabeth Shue after getting the formula, he wants to protect her now. And ultimately the two of them, like she brings out the good in him, right? Like because he starts to like rediscover the humanity that he decided to forego after the young girl died in his past. And the movie ends with her like, they give the cold fusion formula to the people for free. She decides to give it to the world for free. And then they just like end up as a couple, and she gives him like a little pin that is the logo from the old TV show, and it's got like a little halo over it. And because like throughout the whole movie there's been this running joke where, not even joke, but every like alias he uses is the name of a saint, because when he was in that orphanage they would teach them about all the saints, so he always uses those as aliases. So she gives him that, and then the movie ends with him like taking all the money he made from like his criminal past and giving it to different charities. So he realized that now he's become this Robin Hood figure where he's going to keep stealing, but he's only going to steal from the bad guys, and he's going to give the money to like nonprofit organizations and everything. So that's the ending we have, is that this woman helps him become the saint that I guess we know from the novels and the previous TV shows.
And the villains just get arrested.
Oh yeah. The villains just get arrested unceremoniously because
like,
there's no action
whatever
at the end. They're like on a stage, and the villains are revealed to the public to be villains, and the military swoops in and arrests them, and he just stands there smiling like an idiot. Yeah.
So that's the ending we got.
Yeah.
The original Jonathan Hensley script, however, has Emma die.
Not just script, they filmed this.
Oh, they filmed it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Emma dies in Simon Templar's arms after collapsing during a lecture because of her heart condition. And basically Simon then goes to Moscow to avenge her death. So again, we've added some drama to this movie where he needs to go avenge his love, and he battles Ilya on a stairwell, and there's Russian tanks. There's a bunch of earlier Trev mentioned that the line about having the oil stockpiled in the basement. Basically that all gets lit on fire, and Ilya and co like plummet to like a fiery death. It's like this great big awesome climax.
Him and Ilya like fight on top of a chandelier, which we saw that set up earlier in the movie. There's like a scene where they are talking about the chandelier, like, yes, make sure you hang it high as you can. And that doesn't ever matter. But in the original climax, they fought on top of that chandelier as the house is blowing up from all the oil underneath. Yeah.
And then basically,
sounds great.
It sounds like a movie.
Yeah.
So, and then basically at the end of this, Simon wins the day, but he's bummed out, obviously, like his love is dead. So he goes back to Emma's house and finds a letter that she wrote to him. And basically then he decides to use his powers and skills for good.
Yes.
Now, that still wouldn't really work in the movie because I still don't really... I never saw him use his powers for bad. So
yeah, I know.
That's another issue. Is like,
and
this
it's
whole
still
thing about
it's still generic, but but as you said, it's generic, but at least it's like character growth and has like an emotional crux to it. It has a heart, no pun intended, because she doesn't anymore. But
she doesn't anymore. It's annoying too, because I keep hearing even you say throughout this discussion about him using his skills for good and giving back to the people and only going after baddies versus goodies. And I'm just like, well, I saw the movie.
Yeah.
And there's like no evidence that he's this tortured soul that hates humanity. Like, I just don't ever get that in the movie itself. So,
Yeah, the movie could, if you're gonna try to do the movie they thought they were making, there at least could have been a scene or two where he like talks to Emma and he like breaks down about like, oh, I did steal from like this like I was raised in an orphanage, but like a couple years ago I stole from an orphanage and it had to
I threw a
close.
kid down some stairs.
Something, right? Something where you go like, oh yeah, he's been like at least an anti-hero up until this point,
Yeah.
which he doesn't even come across at the beginning. Because like you said, we only ever see him stealing from pieces of shit anyways. So
Yeah.
at the end, we're like, yeah, now he's become the saint. I kind of am like, all right, well, like, what was he at the beginning of the movie? Seems like he's the same dude. He just has like a
Totally.
logo now. Like, yay.
I don't know. This movie obviously, as you can hear,
Phillip Noyce has said that he hopes to someday, because they filmed that ending, and like the reason it was changed is test audiences were not happy about Emma dying.
right.
So it's just funny that like, so then they brought her back for like weeks of reshoots and like redid the entire third act to still include her, and like, but it's just funny that they like couldn't think of a way to like keep her alive but leave in that fight, and like
I know.
it's just so bizarre. But Phillip Noyce has said that someday he hopes to put the director's cut on DVD. We're in 2024 now. We haven't seen that. I'm gonna guess that's not happening. I'm guessing like that footage has probably been like tossed out. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't
Did
know
you
if
like
Paramount
the
has like a saint like a saint reel, an extra saint reel in their vault ready to go.
Did you like the is it the final shot of Simon Templar where he's got like a weird halo behind his head? Did I dream
Yeah,
that?
I don't know. You might like I don't remember that, but I believe that it happened because it is so like on the nose, and I'm sure they did
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, this movie bad.
Yeah. Yeah, we already said we like to wrap up by asking, did this deserve a sequel? And no, it did
No,
not.
a resounding
not
no.
not this version. No, it said
No.
the concept. I still watch this and go, I think you're right that I would rather just see like a more comedic version of it, because
Mhm.
ultimately when you're trying to play it too serious, it is just, I don't know, it comes across like D-level James Bond or something,
Yeah.
or like, and like I said, this was being made at the same time as like, there was even comparisons of the Mission Impossible movies. Like the Mission Impossible series is obviously like the way more successful version of this,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
this just seems like, I made the joke earlier about Phillip Noyce making the kind of movies that dads just stand in the living room and watch on TNT on Sunday afternoons. And this definitely does have that vibe. And so, like I said, I watch it and it's like competently directed. It's about as good as some of those, but it's like not one of the highlights of those. It's just like it's just boring.
It's
That's
just
the worst.
boring.
Yeah,
I
it's
I
weird.
kept
Like when your movie is about like a sexy super thief who steals from like bad guys globally and wears tons of like disguises and
and bangs
romances
Elizabeth Shue.
Yeah, romances Elizabeth Shue, one of like the cutest actresses of all time, who's like, so fun and vivacious. And then you go, oh yeah, but it's also super boring. Something went wrong
Oh
somewhere.
yeah. Like
Yeah.
I wrote this down at an hour in. I said, I'm so dreadfully bored. Why do I
Hmm.
care about Simon? What's he after? What's his motivation? Why has he chosen this life? Whoop-de-doo. What does it all mean, Basil? Like I just don't care about Simon at all. And for a movie like this, for me to follow, like, dude, we mentioned 10 other Hollywood movies, 9 fucking TV movies, 2 TV series. I mean, a play.
Yeah, there's got to be
Like,
something here this movie's missing, obviously. Yeah.
absolutely. Is it the heart? Like, I'm not sure. Well, again, pun unintended. But there was things here like Hugh Grant. Remember, I had mentioned earlier that he had passed on the role because he didn't like the director's approach to the character. I mean, maybe there is something lost here. Even like I realized that Simon Templar in this movie never kills anyone.
Hmm.
And I guess that is something that was new to the series in general, that Charteris's version of the character never had any qualms about killing anyone. So why does it have, is that like a Batman leftover thing that Val Kilmer like held on to, that he doesn't kill anyone? Like I just
Yeah,
don't, I
it's
just don't
weird
get
because
it.
like when you said the thing about like Hugh Grant saying I don't want to do this because I don't like the director's like conception of the character. So that says to me that Hugh Grant did know the character, probably had watched the Roger Moore show, right?
Yes.
And again, so this is you and I making assumptions because I didn't do my due diligence. I didn't go watch it this time. but I would assume that Hugh Grant was looking at this and going, "Why is this so serious?" You know, like I remember this being like a campy, fun thing. I'm Hugh Grant, like I can do that kind of campy, like goofy kind of approach. And probably on the page this read super serious, and I bet you that was the appeal to Val Kilmer, right? Because as we said, Val Kilmer likes to play these like darker, more tortured characters. It's just as we said, the strange disconnect is he signs on because he wants to do the darker version of the Saint. The script is like a darker version, but because it's the Saint, you still have to have him wearing stupid costumes, and you still have to have like, he's like there's that really nerdy scientist that he like does twice in this. The movie even like ends on it too, and we're supposed to be like, ha ha ha, look at me, such a nerd. But it's like it's not meshing with like everything else the movie's trying to do. So just a huge mess and a huge miss. So sorry to kick off Noyce-vember with like, whoa, you really messed this one up, Philip. But and again, I don't know how much of the blame falls on him. It sounds like he originally directed at least a little more interesting of an ending, and he, it got changed on him. But yeah, I think this is one of those ones I ultimately chalk up to. And I know it's funny to say because I don't know the character, but this feels like a misunderstanding of the character.
Yes. Yep. Totally. And it's interesting that in the last few years, there's been talk of this movie coming back, like in some way, shape, or form. In 2020, it was announced that it was coming back with Dexter Fletcher as the director. What did he do? He did Venom, right? The first Venom.
Dexter Fletcher, was he the guy who did
Rocket Man? That was that too.
Yes, that's what I was.
Yes, he did Rocket Man. And then in 2023,
and Bohemian Rhapsody, right? He was the one who replaced Bryan Singer.
Right. Okay, hold on. Did he do Venom?
No, he didn't.
Real time. Oh, he directed Ghosted. The Apple TV. Okay, anyway, well maybe we dodged a bullet there. Anyway, and then in 2023, Doug Liman was directing at the time. So, I mean, that's pretty recent. I don't know. Doug Liman, who knows? Maybe that movie is in production. It'll just show up like that other movie he did with Casey Affleck. Maybe it'll just like show up on our streaming services and we had no idea.
Or like his like Roadhouse, and then it'll show up and he'll be like angry about it. Yeah. Well, I will say, you know what? Like a Doug Liman Saint movie with Jake Gyllenhaal. Again, I'm interested on paper,
Yeah. Same.
Like, yeah. Like the concept seems like it should work. So yeah, I'm not like, this movie didn't make me, this movie
I'm not anti-Saint.
I'm not anti-Saint. No, I'm anti-Val Kilmer, Phillip Noyce, the Saint, which is fine because I didn't have to deal with it anymore anyways. So I guess it all worked out.
So, I mean, that's all my notes. I didn't really have anything else to say. I think we've nailed it here.
No, yeah. I mean, it's actually fairly like amazing that we were able to talk this much about this movie. Yeah. This is probably the most anyone's ever talked about this movie since like 1997. And probably it's more than they talked about it while making it, apparently.
I'll tell you this. I usually use a font size of 11 on my page, right? Mm-hmm. And my page was half full. So I'm rocking 14, baby.
It does answer the question for me though, right? Because like I feel like a lot of these like 90s, like these late 90s, like kind of failed franchise starters, but that were still like positioned as blockbusters.
Yeah,
they have like a little bit of a revival later, or you hear more about like, oh, people come around and say like this was like misunderstood the time they like it, and I never felt like I had that with this, and now I watch it and I go, oh, I get it.
Yeah,
like this is a movie that like, even though he said like it was probably like a modest hit and it probably did well on DVD, you watch it and you go like, yeah, I can understand why this didn't really hold on like in the culture at all, and why it just has become forgotten. So it's a shame like what it did to Val Kilmer's career ultimately, I suppose, but it's not it sucks. I guess I don't know what the point I'm trying to make other than that. So
I will say I didn't think you were gonna like this movie, but I'm very happy you agree that it's boring.
Oh yeah. No,
yeah,
I had the same thought. I was like, I wonder if this is going to be one of those ones where Chris is like, it's not too bad. But no, I don't know how anyone could watch this and not find it boring, honestly.
Yeah. Again, yeah. Anyway. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that's the first part of Noyce-vember. This took us over a few days to make for you, so hopefully you enjoyed it. Moving on from what this movie, The Saint.
Yeah.
Moving on from The Saint, we are going directly into The Bone Collector from 1999. Mm-hmm. I've actually been watching a little bit of 90s crime thriller movies.
Yeah, like serial killer thrillers.
Yeah, serial killer thrillers. Yeah. kind of reignited my interest in them from Longlegs from this year. I was like, oh, I really want to get back to watching a few of them I had missed over the years. So it'll be interesting to see how this holds up and why this one is different than the other ones that, were successful.
Yeah, I think even like you and I were talking about that, and I think I raised this one as like one of the ones, and I think we were both like, oh wait, you should probably just wait on that because we're gonna do it at some point. So
yeah, definitely. Yep. Follow along at F2F Pod. That's at F2 the number 2 F Pod on all the socials. Like us there, like us everywhere. Rate, review, whatever you do. A star rating would be great, especially for the effort of this podcast. And join the tribe and hit that subscribe. And come along with us as we continue our journey of Noyce-vember.
Noyce.
For sure. I was actually a little surprised that you didn't go back to watch maybe even an episode. Because usually you do that. And this time, I guess you dropped the ball. So. Oh, and you're gone again. You're definitely gone.
I know I dropped out. Yeah. I can't. Yeah, it's definitely got to be clean feed.
It's
like,
clean feed. It's clean feed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think you should. I like that thing about you bringing up how I didn't.
Fuck! You're gone! Oh my god. Oh, thank god. Okay. Okay, let me get my plot summary, okay? Because even if you drop out, which I think you just did, it doesn't really matter. So, I'm going to wait for you to come back anyways.
I'm sorry, I know you're annoyed, but the fact that you said even if you drop out and then it dropped, fucking comedy gold. I'm sorry.
Oh, man, okay. What do you want now? Do you risk it for the biscuit?
Probably not. I mean,
probably not. Yeah, okay, that's what I think too. I think too, because I feel like I wanna actually have a good back and forth rather than the stopping and starting to especially discuss the movie is gonna probably be annoying.
Yeah.
Okay. This is the first time I think we've ever had to table an episode for the next day.
Yeah.
Wow.
The magic of Phillip Noyce.
All right. Oh, and you left. Oh my god, Trev just dropped out, which he's done many times, and I might keep this and put it at the back of the episode as our post credit because holy shit, what a ride!
I got the little.
Did you hear that? You heard that?
Yep.
Okay, so this is a test. I'm sitting about 6 inches away from the mic as usual. Talking about my day, my computer. Holy, that's hilarious! Ha 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 ha. Okay, now Trev, you talk.
Nothing is hilarious. Everything is bad. Are you still there?
Yeah, I am. Did you hear me laugh?
Yeah, I did. I was just
okay. Good. Okay.
Then I heard nothing, and I was like, "Oh God, don't tell me."
Okay,
come on, Zoom. You were our savior during COVID. You have to be our savior tonight too.
Yeah. Okay, let me stop the recording.
Okay.